The war in Yemen threatens the security of the Horn of Africa. The UN warns the crisis could open a corridor for so-called jihadist movements through Somalia. The fighting has already sent thousands fleeing across the sea to Djibouti, Puntland and Somaliland. So what can be done to prevent an already fragile region from descending further into chaos? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Fuliba Thibault. Yemen's security has deteriorated so badly in recent months that the UN is now concerned about the fallout on neighboring countries. This week, UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon warned in a report that the crisis in Yemen could open up what he called a corridor for jihadists to Somalia, which is located just across the Gulf of Aden. The UN is worried about Al-Qaeda's affiliate in Yemen, which is active in the south of the country. While across the Gulf, the UN warns that the Al-Qaeda-linked group Al-Shabab has become increasingly active in places like Puntland as well as elsewhere. Well, before we bring in our guests for today's show, here's the UN Special Representative for Somalia describing why he's worried.
I remain concerned about security in Somalia and about the threat posed by Al-Shabab to the wider sub-region, demonstrated by the heinous attack on Kenya's Garissa University in April. We need to monitor closely and be able to respond to any sign that Al-Shabab is benefiting from their links to extremist groups in Yemen and from the instability there.
Well, let's bring in our guests for today's Inside Story. Joining us from Mogadishu, we have Yusuf Hassan. He's the editor-in-chief of Hakika Times newspaper. In Nairobi, we've got Macharia Munene, a professor of international relations at the United States International University in Kenya. And in Sana'a, via Skype, is Hisham Al-Omaisi, a Yemeni political analyst and information consultant. Thank you all for being on Inside Story. Hisham, if I may start with you, there have been several conflicts in Yemen since 1948. Just paint us a picture of the current situation in the country, politically, of course, economically, as well as socially. How dire is the situation today in Yemen?
Well, there's generally a lack of a central government in Yemen. There are multiple battlefronts raging across Yemen in several governorates. Of course, the economy is in shambles. Yemen imports 90% of its food. 2 months blockade is creating a humanitarian catastrophe in Yemen. There is almost 35 to 40% unemployment. More than 60% of the people are food insecure. Poverty rate is above 50%. It is very easy in those conditions to recruit people to join extreme groups, extremists, terrorists, or even warlords that are now becoming prominent across the country.
So what you're describing here is what many would see as a failed state, of course. And Yusuf Hassan, in Mogadishu, Somalia was once described as the quintessential failed state. But there have been efforts to bring back normalcy to the country, for a return to normalcy after decades of war. To what extent do you see the war in Yemen today, Yusuf, complicating the situation in Somalia and the rest of the Horn of Africa?
The situation in Yemen definitely will affect in Somalia. And Somalia has been suffering long civil war for the last 25 years. And now Yemen was nearest Arab country in Somalia, and more than 500,000 Somali refugees flee to Yemen, and today they are stuck in Yemen, and they have real humanitarian crisis and security as well. And also Somalia has a problem, security problem, financial problem, and is not ready to bring back the Somali refugee, and also the new ADBs or refugee from Yemen. Somaliland and Puntland regions, they are very close to Yemen, and first Yemeni refugee has been arrived already, and no refugee can be there. Somalis, they are not prepared on that. Even Somalia can't handle their own IDPs. More than 500,000 IDPs in Mogadishu, the Somali capital itself, and Somali government is not capable to help them. And international community also, they are not doing anything tangible in Mogadishu. Okay. So imagine if thousands of millions of Yemeni refugees and Somali refugees who is trying to come back to Somalia, come back right now, imagine the suffer they will face and the problem.
We will look at the refugee and the humanitarian situation. Sorry to interrupt you. We will take a closer look at the humanitarian situation in just a minute. But I want to bring in Macharia Munene in Nairobi first to talk about the other states in the region. Macharia, how are they feeling the effects of the war in Yemen right now?
Well, there has been quite a lot of concern in the last few weeks over the development in Yemen because of the ripple effect. In two ways. First of all, the generation of large numbers of refugees which are likely to filter into the rest of the countries in the Horn, and then the security aspect of it, the proliferation of arms that are likely to infiltrate the zone, given that Yemen is reputed to be amongst those countries with the highest number of per capita weapon possession. And so you have all these people running around with uncontrollable weapons now coming in either as refugees or some other things. It's a threat, it's a concern or threat to the region, and the countries are watching it very carefully because they're going to be affected directly.
I'm wondering about the arms flow from Somalia to Yemen. Somalia, of course, is under a UN arms embargo. Now that Yemen is at war, has that changed? Are we seeing less arms in Somalia or not?
No, according, as you know, and all the report is mentioned before, Yemen was the main supplier of small army weapon to Somalia for last 25 years. And now, if Somali refugee come back, and Yemenis as well, and really many experts expect it more small army will enter the Somalia and is fuel the problem again. If because the Somaliland and Puntland, Berbera port and the Bosaso port is very close to Yemen. So, and now all Somalia and Yemen has the relationship, trade through the ships, small ships and big one also. So all of these, if comes to Somalia, it will come with a weapon, definitely, many of them, and no proper government who can control all of these. So it will fuel the situation in Somalia if the international community and Arab League, Arab countries intervene and have a proper Arab force who can protect the refugees themselves. And also secure the security. Somali government, they can't handle this kind of situation.
Hisham Al-Umaisi in Sana'a, I do want to get your view on this. The reports that the flow of arms from Yemen to Somalia has now been reversed, that now, on the contrary, we're seeing small arms from Somalia getting into Yemen. Is that the case in Yemen right now?
It goes both ways, but there are more weapons going out of Yemen. You have to remember, with the falling apart of the army and the central government, there are a lot of army generals who are taking weapons from those camps and selling them on the black market, not just within Yemen, also outside of Yemen, including Somalia. We've been hearing reports of tanks, of heavy machinery, heavy military machinery being sold to Somalia from military camps, from governmental military camps. Now that's on one side. On the other side, the people that are dropping weapons, and by the people I mean the coalition, they are dropping more weapons into Yemen, trying to arm the resistance. This is in a country that is already the second highest, where there's already the second highest gun ownership in Yemen. 70 million guns in the hands of the people, and Saudi Arabia still dropping more weapons, and those weapons are being proliferated, not just in Yemen, across the border, even going back towards Saudi.
Macharia Munene, Djibouti's president last week warned that the violence in Yemen could allow Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, which is currently operating, of course, in Yemen, in the south in particular, to expand its power and control to the Horn of Africa, to places like Djibouti, Somalia. Is this something that you see happening in the near future, Macharia?
That's a very high likelihood. The Al-Qaeda has had operations in the Horn of Africa. We've had experience with their various attacks. They are linked to the Al-Shabab. In fact, they are very close, almost brothers. One little brother and the other one big brother. And the possibility of the Al-Qaeda expanding its presence more visibly than it has seemed to be in the recent past is very high. And so the chaos in Yemen is one that has global dimensions to it, because when you have such a place with creating such instability, the ripple effect in the region is devastating to the countries of the place. So those countries in the Horn, and Kenya in particular, is very concerned about what's going on in Yemen, because it may look as if it is far, but Kenya has this tendency to be the recipient of some things happening somewhere else. And terrorism, which is an issue related to what's going on over there, is very much in the conscience of Kenyan officials, that Yemen problems there are actually going to be exported to Kenya, either directly or indirectly. And so we are concerned about that Al-Qaeda, Al-Shabab terrorist expansion.
Hisham, do you agree with that? Should they be concerned about Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula wanting to expand to the Horn of Africa? Is there interest?
Be concerned. Al-Qaeda has already taken a port city, which is Hadramaut and Al-Mukalla. They're already in control of it. They're already in alliance with the tribes there, which means they've already expanded their dominion. They're getting more people inside and they're exporting them. And the closest thing, of course, is the Horn of Africa. So they should definitely be worried. You have to remember one thing. Al-Qaeda is not just growing because of the instability, because of the lack of central government. They're also growing because they're reacting to the Houthi expansion. Al-Houthi and Al-Qaeda war has been going on even when there was a central government. Now that the Houthis are basically, essentially, the de facto government, it acted as a catalyst for the growth of Al-Qaeda. So you'll have more people, more tribes joining and allying with Al-Qaeda, and now taking governorates, whole governorates, especially port cities. They will definitely be encroaching towards Kenya, towards Somaliland, towards Puntland, even across the border to Saudi Arabia.
That's a very dire prediction, of course. Yusuf Hassan in Mogadishu, what has been the relationship between Al-Qaeda and Al-Shabab, which is, of course, based in Somalia but operating in the region, in Kenya notably? Has there been a strong relationship between these two groups, or have they been cooperating?
According to what the Shabab said before, they have a strong link with Al-Qaeda, and they say we are party of Al-Qaeda, but Shabab they divided later on, but the strongest group on Shabab never said they don't have any relation with Al-Qaeda, and the way they will work, the way they work together, it's similar, and foreign fighters came in Somalia and fight with the Al-Shabab side by side, and that it wasn't hidden, it was well known. The latest report is saying white widow lady, woman, now she joined it with the Shabab, and she works closely with the leader of Al-Shabab, and we don't have confirmation, but that's what some media quotes. So the Al-Shabaab, they never denied their relation with Al-Qaeda.
Okay.
So Al-Qaeda has, they are in Yemen, So if some of them comes in Somalia, definitely they will support the Shabab.
What is Al-Shabaab's presence? What is their strength like in Somalia right now? I know there's a deep presence in south and central Somalia, that they've been weakened in places like Mogadishu and so on. But how do you counter that deep presence that they still have in south and central Somalia?
Al-Shabaab, they control many areas in Somalia. They don't control big cities in the south and central, but all the area in the south and central, in the south, from Kismayo, close to Kismayo area, and the Lower Shabelle, and Hiran, and Bay and Bakol, and even part of Galgaduud region, they control all the area, small towns, and they paralyze the government movements, and the only supply, it comes through the airplane, even so they control the large area, but they don't control many big cities.
Okay.
After they lost Kismayo and their headquarters in Barawe, which is 130 kilometers on the south of Mogadishu.
Okay, I do want to talk about the humanitarian aspect.
Strong.
They're still strong, you say. I want to talk about the humanitarian aspect in just a moment, but let me just ask Macharia Munene in Nairobi about this long connection, Macharia, that's been made between Al-Qaeda and Al-Shabaab's current leadership. Does that connection exist? Do you think it's strengthened over the last few years?
It's difficult to say, but it does appear as if it's been strengthened, and both appear as if they are hydras. You knock off one head in one place and then they crop up somewhere else. But the strong linkage between the two is clearly there, and they do admit at least that they are linked together. And the issue that comes up is how to tackle it, because it is mostly an attitude thing, a mental thing, not just a guns and sticks thing. It is more how to reach those vulnerable people who are recruited into it, and ensure that in the long run you undercut the zone of operation in terms of recruitment. So there is a strong linkage. It's a long-term challenge to the countries of the region, that they have to come up with strategies that will not be short-term but long-term.
Okay. Hisham, there's been a suggestion that the smuggling in this region has actually been partly responsible for propping up these so-called terrorist organizations like Al-Shabaab, like Al-Qaeda. Is that true?
It is to a certain extent. You have to remember, we have a huge shoreline that is not controlled, it's not patrolled. So smuggling is part of the game. And of course, it's bandits that work on this, and Al-Qaeda has to have a secure income. And of course, they don't do that through legal means. They don't have businesses running to get money from that. So they resort to smuggling, they resort to shady businesses. They attack banks, they do shady business on the side. And that, of course, supports their operations.
Right. Okay, well, let's take a look now at the humanitarian situation. As all of you have mentioned, the security worsening in Yemen means that thousands of refugees have had to flee the country, many of them to the Horn of Africa. That's reversed a refugee flow that used to see people from Africa seeking refuge in Yemen. The International Organization for Migration says more than 18,000 people have fled Yemen across the Red Sea to the Horn of Africa. The majority of them either to Djibouti, which has taken more than 11,000 people, or Puntland and Somaliland, which have taken almost 7,000 refugees. Hisham, it just goes to show how dire the situation is when you have people from Yemen actually fleeing the country to go to Somalia.
It is actually very sad, especially when we have multiple IDP camps for Somalians and Ethiopians as well in Yemen, and now the situation has been reversed. But you have to remember, the country, 50% of the population in the country were food insecure before the war. Poverty rates were skyrocketing, unemployment, instability, multiple battlefronts being opened at several governorates before the war. So when it finally ripped, a couple of months ago, you have people dying on the streets, the airstrikes hitting residential areas, Houthis advancing in the south, resistance taking encampments in the south and fighting back. Electricity, of course, is gone. The food is gone. The water is gone. The blockade is not making it any better. It's actually making it much, much worse. That led to an exodus outside of Yemen to whoever is going to receive us. Of course, with Egypt blocking us, Jordan also blocking us, now requiring visas, people being returned from the Saudi border. So our only way out is basically Somalia and Djibouti, and hence the exodus to the Horn of Africa.
Right, and these are countries that can't really afford, Macharia Munene, to take on any refugees. Places like Somalia or Djibouti are not ready to take on refugees from Yemen. So how do their governments, how does the Horn of Africa handle this situation today?
It is a serious crisis. In fact, there is a paradox, as implied there, that these people are running to countries that are not able to deal with them and keep them financially, and not to those countries that have the capacity in terms of resources. Saudi Arabia has a lot of resources, and the question is why they are not running there, or those are the neighboring countries. So when they come across the Red Sea to Djibouti or to Puntland, and some of them will end up in Kenya, it creates a bigger crisis than what there is.
I mean, in
already.
Kenya, you have the government
we know that Kenya has been complaining about it.
Exactly. They've threatened actually to send back, to shut down the refugee camps in northern Kenya, but that's not really the solution, is it?
Yes. No, the issue that arose at that time when the Deputy President raised the question was the connection, the supposed connection between those who claim to be refugees and the insecurity. Some of them were said to be perpetrators of terrorist acts or connected to the terrorists. And so when you have more refugees coming, some of them with guns and all those things, the question comes in, can the countries be able to manage them and stop them at a point of entry in order to be secure? Because they each feel that they have to secure their own countries first before they can even help somebody else. So I think it's a big issue for the international community that those that are able financially and materially to deal with it are not willing to take them. So they end up going to the places where they are kept, or they do not have the capacity to absorb all of them. So it is going to intensify the crisis, and it can become a humanitarian catastrophe unless something serious is done about it.
Okay, Yusuf Hassan in Mogadishu, what should be done on the part of the international community to prevent Somalia from descending into chaos once again?
Well, I think the best option is the Arab country, they have to prepare before any other country in the world to accept the reality, which is Somalia can't handle this problem. So they have to look alternative, and what the best is to help Somaliland and Puntland region to welcome the refugee and to support them financially, and security also. They can provide them like Arab force who can protect the refugee, and also look if there are any ungenuine refugee. That's one option. Another hand, I think the whole world, they have to cooperate to solve, and UNHCR and the International Red Cross and other humanitarian agencies, they are not doing anything right now inside Somalia. And so they have to talk, they have to come, they have to prepare. Already no one was expecting Yemen refugee will come to Somalia in this within few months.
Okay.
So absolutely we are facing a humanitarian catastrophe if the more refugee comes to Somalia.
We have heard your message. Thank you so much for being with us today. Yusuf Hassan in Mogadishu, Macharia Munene in Nairobi, and Hisham Al-Omaisi in Sana'a. Thank you all for being on Inside Story. And thank you for joining us as well. We'd love to hear your thoughts as always. You can get in touch with us on our program page at aljazeera.com. You can also post your comments at facebook.com/AJ Inside Story, or tweet us at AJ Inside Story. From me, Fuli Batibo, and the whole team, thanks for watching. Bye for now.